Hi, I'm Isaac Simon Hodes, community organizer with Lynn United for Change, recording from Project No One Leaves top secret Southern New England Command Center.
Hi, I'm Eloise Lawrence. I work at the Harvard Legal Aid Bureau as a staff attorney, and I work with Isaac and Lynn United for Change. Today, go ahead, Isaac.
Well, and you're recording from the top secret Project No One
Yes.
Leaves west of Boston Command Center. So real quickly, Lynn, Massachusetts is a small working class city on Boston. The foreclosure crisis hit us particularly hard, and myself and some other Lynn residents brought the model developed by City Life in Boston for anti-foreclosure organizing to Lynn, and together with Eloise's help, we've adapted it, and Eloise is going to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I think everybody's pretty familiar with the sword and shield model of using lawyers and organizers together. So I wanted to skip to where we are in 2015 in Lynn. Lynn specifically, the foreclosures have dropped off dramatically the way they have in many places around the country. And real estate prices are coming back. But they are behind sort of the dramatic spikes that you're seeing in Boston and other areas that are sort of considered hot markets. And so gentrification, while gentrification is not a huge problem currently in Lynn, we are starting to see lots of speculators come in and try to buy up the homes of our members, which is causing us just a little bit of distress. So while we've helped many homeowners fight evictions and foreclosures over the last 3.5, 4 years, we find that our members, both tenants and homeowners, are still, many of them are still in limbo. And that's of great concern to us and where a lot of our current work is. What I mean by in limbo is homeowners who have the ability to buy back through a Boston Community Capital or another nonprofit, but Fannie and Freddie's policies, while they've changed on the books, they're making it very difficult to actually buy back because the prices are too high. Similarly with HUD insured mortgages, we are having a difficulty actually completing buyback transactions. So that's an issue where our homeowners have been in limbo for many, many years. Similarly with tenants, we're finding that although in Massachusetts we're very lucky to have a law that requires banks, including Fannie and Freddie, to rent to tenants, that as a matter of course, Fannie and Freddie in particular are ignoring that law and just trying to bring eviction after eviction. And even though we're defending them in those evictions, you know, the fourth eviction comes around and tenants are getting very, very tired. And this limbo, it becomes so wearing. So that's an area of concern. And even those mortgagors, for example, who we've achieved loan modifications. Many of those loan modifications did not include principal reduction, probably like across in your areas around the country. And many of those are unstable. And so we're concerned about those homeowners, and they're already falling behind, or in many cases, the way the servicers are servicing those, they seem to be designed to make people go back into default just by how they do them. So all of these areas are issues that we're dealing with right now. And we have, as a result, tried to do things on the grassroots level a little bit differently to address some of these concerns and try to create some protections and stability at the grassroots level. And so Isaac and I wanted to talk to you about an effort that we had in Lynn called the Homeowners Bill of Rights, which was passed by the local legislature. And Isaac's going to explain that a little bit.
So we included 3 pieces in the anti-foreclosure ordinance. One was mandatory mediation prior to foreclosure with a third-party mediator and the right to in-person negotiation. The second was a repair and upkeep bond for foreclosing entities. And the third, that kind of pushed the envelope the most, is the right to rent post-foreclosure for homeowners. That's a right that tenants in Massachusetts already have, but this added homeowners to that group that has that right. And it was a huge effort to get this passed. We had to win a vote in the city council. The mayor of Lynn then vetoed this ordinance, and we had to win an override vote. And I think the process of winning this legislation really demonstrated the strength of the model that brings together community lawyering and individual casework with community organizing and movement building work. We had these hearings where there were hundreds of people that our group was able to turn out because of the relationships we built and the trust we developed by doing this individual casework, by connecting people with Eloise and legal services and keeping them in their homes long enough so that they could develop a consciousness around the broader movement and the need for systemic change. We had lots of folks testify who personally had, become involved because they just needed help with their individual home, but had then gone beyond that to become leaders in the movement. So I think it really demonstrated some of the strengths of what this model has been able to do. Following passage of the bill, we worked really hard to get it implemented as quickly as possible, and the ordinance itself was very much inspired by Springfield, Mass., which was the first one to pass two of those components. But Lynn became the first city to actually get it implemented and to have a mediation program working on the ground. And like Eloise said, the wins we had through the mediation program didn't always involve principal reduction, although a number of people did gain principal reduction through that. But it definitely gave us access to lists where we could do outreach earlier in the foreclosure process, where we could bring people in, and it did prevent, I think, dozens of foreclosures in the short time that it was operating. But eventually we did hit a little bit of a brick wall, and Eloise is going to talk about that and some of the problems we had.
As many of you have experienced, the banks are never done fighting us, and when we have a victory, they're determined to keep pushing their agenda of their bottom line. And unfortunately, the banks in Massachusetts sued the city of Springfield about their ordinances, and it went up to the Supreme Judicial Court of Massachusetts. And unfortunately, the Supreme Judicial Court sided with the banks in ruling that local municipalities could not enact these kinds of ordinances at the local level, and it needed to be done at the state level, which was deeply disappointing for us and meant that in Lynn we've had to repeal the very successful mediation ordinance and the bond ordinance that Isaac described earlier. But the one positive is that we did have a piece of the bill which Isaac described, of the Bill of Rights, which is what we call a just cause or a right to rent by homeowners. And that piece was not challenged, and it is one of the first such laws that we're aware of. I know that Lawrence, Massachusetts also has subsequently adopted one. And we think, we have protected this despite a lot of local pressure to get rid of it and say, you know what, we tried, but these banks are bigger than us, and let's not get sued anymore. We've instead said, no, keep fighting. It's worth fighting. And once again, we got a big group out and convinced the local City Council in Lynn to protect that piece, and we hope to use that as a building block for a broader movement for right to rent for homeowners in their home. And Isaac's going to talk about that in our next steps, because we do believe that that is the part of the next phase of this fight, and we believe that Lynn will be a good jumping off part for a much broader effort in Massachusetts, and hopefully with the help of all of you we could maybe talk about today whether that could be a more national effort. So Isaac, next steps?
Thanks, Eloise. So I think that's a good place to start, is that, I know I'm feeling, and a lot of folks in our group and maybe others are feeling, that there's a little bit of a dilemma where we see the housing crisis shifting. Foreclosures are still an issue, and we still have a lot of members who need help fighting foreclosure. On the other hand, there's a push to start emphasizing more work with tenants, with anti-displacement and anti-gentrification that doesn't necessarily focus on foreclosure specifically. And I think that's something I'm hoping folks can talk about, how to integrate those two pieces, how to bring our anti-foreclosure work into dialogue with the broader housing justice movement and make the two complement each other. So in Boston, I think next week there's a hearing on some really great work that City Life and others are doing to take Just Cause a step further and make it apply not just post-foreclosure, but generally for tenants across the board. So I think that's a good example of sort of building on this and going forward and making it broader. In terms of other potential projects or campaigns that are foreclosure related, I feel like I don't have a great answer. We have a few suggestions that Eloise and I have come up with, but I'll preface it by saying I think one thing that our movement needs to do a better job at is having a common research agenda where we work together across discipline, lawyers, organizers, community members, students, to all develop campaigns and the information we need to do the work in a way that builds on the strength of what we've done so far, bringing together casework with broader demands, but also has a kind of coherent strategy, a coherent set of targets that we can push on a regional or even national basis. That's something that we kind of, I think, didn't do that effectively in the last round of this fight, and we can do more of going forward. So that said, a few possible areas to explore that we came up with. One is Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac's policy on rentals, which is still terrible. They're still causing lots of unnecessary displacement. HUD and FHA still have similarly really bad policies that are causing displacement, and that may be an area to explore. As I mentioned before, the Just Cause piece at a local level, we've had much more success at the city level than at the state or national level. And I think finally, in terms of foreclosure specifically, we're seeing more and more of the cases we come into contact with concentrated with a small number of large national servicers, NationStar, Greentree, etc. And that's difficult because they're so far away and remote, they don't have local branches, but it also gives us a chance to really collectivize the struggle and not get caught up in just doing one individual case after another in a really isolated way. But to do that, we need some research on what kind of vulnerabilities those big companies have, what kind of connections they have, where their funding comes from, and how we could pressure them. And I guess that connected to that is the issue with investors, both small-time speculators who are buying up foreclosed and empty properties, and then also really big private equity, hedge funds, etc. Are two more places that there's been talk about, but I think we need some concrete research to figure out how and where that translates into specific winnable campaigns with specific targets we can pressure. So hopefully you all can bring back some information and feedback and answers, and we can continue working together against foreclosure and more broadly for housing justice.
Yes, Isaac, I just wanted to add on to your last point, which I think is it's very timely that Fannie Mae has just announced that it will be selling off huge numbers of its, quote, distressed assets, meaning loans that have been in default for a long time, to hedge funds and the like. This is the way that HUD has gone, and we really need to get on top of this, as Isaac says, and figure out get the information. But I think this, although is on one level a very negative trend and shows that the country is basically just ridding itself, the national government is just ridding itself of the problem and wants to move on. It presents a potential opportunity for organizing and also for getting families back on track and maybe getting their homes back, but we need to see it as an opportunity and work together. And so that's, you know, one of the things that Isaac and I hope that we'll talk about today, and we're just very excited that we had the opportunity to be part of this, and we look forward to the conversations going forward, and keep up the fight. Thank you.
Thank you.